This is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I started reading the Hardy Boys Casefiles series by accident. See, I misread the library catalog, and I thought it said the fourth book was about evil scientists making superhumans to take over the world. Hardy Boys 4, Wrath of Khan. Sounds great, right? Well, the Lazarus plot has nothing to do with Star Trek, but it's still a good book. It begins with Joe Hardy seeing his girlfriend Iola, which is impossible because she died in book 1. Either Joe is having morbid delusions, or this is the world's most obvious trap. Iola was seen on a one-way road that leads to the Lazarus Clinic, an abandoned mental hospital / prison thingy that is the perfect headquarters for an evil organization. Our heroes go inside where they meet the culprits of the book, the Hardy Boys. Dun dun dun. Yep, this book has deadly doubles. Not like that bad Nancy Drew Files book, they're more like Hardy Boy clones. The clone makers line up for a roll call. They are a Nazi plastic surgeon, a Soviet-Russian torturer, a communist Chinese brainwasher, and Peter, an American computer programmer. One of these villains really doesn't fit in with the others. The final villain is the leader, who I'm going to call Lazarus. The book never reveals Lazarus's true identity because the author couldn't think of a good one. And since love is more important than world domination, the villains politely leave the room so Joe and Iola can have some private time. After 20 minutes of questioning, Joe is convinced that she is the real Iola, not a clone. Lazarus orders some incompetent underlings to kill the Hardys, but Frank and Joe escape by throwing dirt at them. It's not a very impressive escape, but hey, it works. The Hardy Boys go home where they briefly talk with Chet Morton. For whatever reason, the Hardys don't bother to tell Chet that his sister Iola is still alive. What gives, Frank and Joe? That's something you should mention. Since Mr. Hardy is gone on vacation, he's never around when his sons are on a case that he could easily resolve, Frank and Joe are forced to go follow their clones to Washington, D.C. They meet their government contact, the Gray Man. A tense confrontation ensues because the Gray Man isn't sure if they're the real boys or the clones. Frank and Joe prove their identities by being unwilling to hurt anyone. Oh, what? This is the 5th fight of the book, and the Gray Man recognizes the Hardy Boys because they don't fight? That doesn't make sense. I don't know. The Gray Man must be off his game today because the Hardy clones appear and easily take everyone hostage. The clones want to kill the Gray Man's boss, who is the best spy in the United States. Her house has no security at all, so I suspect she is more like the worst spy in the United States. I also suspect that Frank and Joe secretly want to kill each other, because Frank beats up Joe's clone while Joe punches Frank's clone in the face. Frank and Joe return to the Lazarus Clinic, where they try to sneak in. When that fails, they pretend to be the Hardy clones. When that fails, they fight their way to Iola. Joe is ready to passionately embrace her when she pulls out a gun. Surprise! It's not Iola at all. It's Iola Clone! Dun dun dun! Remember the start of the book where Joe proved Iola wasn't a clone by asking her private questions for 20 minutes? It turns out the clone passed his test because she read Iola's diary. Yeah, I don't buy this. I could believe the cloning thing, but a diary that perfectly covers years of personal details? That's too unrealistic for me. Lazarus tells Iola to kill the Hardy Boys, but Joe gives a passionate true love speech, and she realizes she can't possibly hurt him. The culprits are arrested, and the book ends by saying that Iola Clone is really a girl named Sally Collins. Lazarus refuses to say if the real Iola is dead or alive, but Joe doesn't care. He knows that the real Iola is out there somewhere. Frank and Joe decide to find her. The end. Post-book follow-up. Not to be a killjoy, but the series immediately drops the storyline of finding Iola. The Hardy Boys don't look for her, and she spends the rest of the series dead. Well, except for book number 80, where we have a second Iola clone. Yes, a second clone! Honestly, I think the book would have been better if it turned out that Iola Clone was the real Iola. Happy endings are always much better than unresolved cliffhangers. The advertising for this series made it seem like the first 4 books go together, but that's not really true. It's more accurate to say that Book 4 is a direct sequel to Book 1. In fact, if you go back to Chapter 14 of the first book, you'll realize that the culprit used the Lazarus clinic to disguise himself as Detective Butler. I'm impressed that the series thought 3 books ahead, considering that most of these books are written by different people. As I said at the beginning of this review, this was the first Hardy Boys Casefiles book that I read, and it's very good. The book moves quickly and it's action-packed. I'd give this book a perfect score, but I'm taking a point away for all that stuff about Iola being a clone who read the most detailed diary in history. So my final score for Hardy Boys Casefiles number 4, The Lazarus Plot, is a 9 out of 10.